really like to hear about this. Now, hang on, I'm clicking the record button. Recording has started. Way right, bit of a lag. So we've got a fabulous turnout. So we'll have to whiz through this quite quickly. Gareth Hill, I'm a public health practitioner with Bolton, and very interested in engaging with licensing and seeing if we can use it to promote well-being, reduce some of the alcohol-related harm. So, Paul.
Hello, everybody. Paul Burton from Public Health at the Trafford Council. I'm a little bit more behind the scenes these days when it comes to substance misuse. My colleague Amy leads, but I'm very interested in this agenda because I still maintain the hold on licensing from a council point of view. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. And Naira?
Naira Zaman, Public Health team at Manchester City Council.
And is it Mike? Sorry, from Bury.
Yeah, Michael Bridge. I'm the licensed unit manager at Bury Council.
Thanks. And Sue Duckworth.
Hi, I'm from Leeds City Council and I work in entertainment licensing.
Hi. Rachel.
Hi everyone, Rachel Nielsen. I'm a population health project manager, mainly leading alcohol exposed pregnancy, but with a widening remit around alcohol.
Okay. Adam.
Hi everybody, Adam Taylor. I'm an analyst in the public health team for Leeds City Council and what used to be the CCG as well.
Right. And Myrtle.
Tricky name, yeah.
Sorry.
It's fine. It's Myrthe, actually, from the Netherlands originally. So I'm Myrthe Elbers. I'm a health improvement specialist in Leeds City Council, and I've been involved and working closely with Sue on licensing and also gambling, if anybody's interested. Yeah, so I'm sort of co-presenting today.
Thank you. Delighted to have Leeds colleagues with us. Phil.
Hi, Phil Zari. I work at Bolton Council Public Health, Data and Intelligence Analyst.
Right. And Millie?
Hi, I'm Millie Slezak. I'm the Advanced Health Improvement Specialist in Drugs and Alcohol here at Leeds City Council. I did spend a long time living in Manchester and working as an A&E nurse, so I know the areas.
Oh, great. Lovely to have you. And Sarah?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Turton. I'm a public health practitioner at Bury Council with a remit around drugs, alcohol, smoking and gambling.
Right. And is the F for Francesca?
Yeah, Francesca Trabin, Drug and Alcohol Commissioning Team at Wigan Council.
Smashing. And then up top we've got Dawn.
Hi, I'm Population Health Analyst at Bury Council.
Hi, and Laura Jones.
Hi, Laura Jones, Deputy Licensing Officer at Bury Council.
Hi, and David. Are you with us, David? I think David might have, if you're with us, David, you're on mute, but I think he might have just been maybe called away for a sec. So really very warm welcome, everyone. It's an ad hoc informal group, just sort of sprang up from an idea. Just a quick recap on last time. We had three, well, we had two very good presentations and one from me. Two of those should have been were mailed out and shared after the meeting. That was my own personal reflections on licensing in Bolton, and I wanted to particularly focus on some of the informal approaches that I make, picking up the phone to those applicants while they're still desperately wanting to get that license and negotiating hard to around anything which doesn't sit comfortably with us, anything where they really haven't properly described how they're going to reinforce those licensing objectives, and any opportunities to get them to promote and share healthy messages. And then we had an excellent presentation from Naira about the challenges we've got about online orders and deliveries of alcohol, and how we regulate that, and how we prevent young people from coming into harm with that. And Sarah from Bury presented on this very exciting data matrix, and as a result of that, we have Leeds colleagues here today, and I think we're all looking forward to hearing from you. Is everyone happy to move forward onto Leeds? Brilliant, thank you very much. So Leeds colleagues, you're very welcome, and delighted to hear from you.
Thanks. High expectations, so I hear. But that's all good. Okay, I'll just open our presentation. If you could just let me know if you can see that okay, and then
okay.
Yeah, we can.
Do you see the slides on the side though? Because obviously that's not particularly helpful. Do you see the
That's it now.
presenter view like this? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
now,
good.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Yeah. As long as everybody can see it, because I know sometimes you get the slide next to it. So so yeah, I think we've all introduced ourselves earlier. So I'll just kick off because we're all doing our little bit. So I just wanted to share a bit of an outline as to what we're intending to cover. And again, it would be obviously because I'm presenting, I can't see if anybody's got their hand up. So if somebody could just keep an eye on that, because I think what would be helpful is if people have got questions throughout, I think we're more than happy to be interrupted. So I just wanted to say that. So we're starting with the aims of the alcohol licensing data matrix. A little bit of background. Again, won't go into it too much, but we just had a little brainstorm before this meeting about ingredients for success. And then I'm handing over to Adam from an analyst perspective. So it's more about the kind of statistical side and how the matrix was built. Then I'm handing over to Sue to give a licensing perspective, and Sue will also not just touch on practical application of the data matrix, but also how it's informed the cumulative impact assessment that's recently been updated in Leeds. And then finally, obviously a public health perspective will just chip in a little bit as part of this, and giving a couple of examples of where we've been successful in applying the matrix. So I'll just go on to the aims. So these were these are actually, you know, the original aims of why it was put together. So it's to establish if an application located in a specific postcode will have a negative impact on the promotion of the licensing objectives. So we very much work on sort of locality level data, and Adam will talk about that a little bit more. And the data allows the licensing subcommittee to consider the application in the context of the local area and the problems being experienced by the population. And I think the third bullet point is probably one of the most important, because I'm sure that any of you have been involved in objecting to applications have been kind of party to, is you'll have a lot of anecdotal evidence from elected members, from residents, from businesses, but this actually backs up some of the kind of quantitative evidence that you might need, and that's sort of quite a powerful combination. So the background, and again, I was not personally involved in this. Sue and Adam obviously have been involved in from the beginning. My understanding is that the development started in 2017, and then it went live in terms of it was starting to be used as part of the licensing process in 2018. And then in 2021, I worked with Adam and also my manager, Dan Byrne, and Sue to refresh some of the data sets, look at some of the weightings. And again, Adam will explain in detail. But so it's what I'm trying to say is it has had a refresh since then. And it's just worth noting that We obviously got national recognition for the work. We were shortlisted for an LGA award in 2019. So yeah, I think as a result of that, it's had quite a lot of interest from other local authorities. So yeah, just a bit of a list of things that we thought really need to be in place to make it happen. And I think for us, the relationship between licensing and public health really has to be very strong, and obviously needs to be kind of mutually respectful. And so the license team obviously have to be open to working with public health and seeing the value of those data sets and what they tell us. It must be part of a wider discussion around alcohol harm. So not just about the availability of alcohol on premises, but you'll see from the kind of data sets that we included, it's much bigger than that. Obviously, just from a practical perspective, you will need the expertise of an analyst or public health intelligence to help you put something like this together, because it is a very technical process, especially if you're talking about weightings and very sort of specific locality level detail. And then also what you need is obviously the buy-in from other responsible authorities as part of this process. And that's obviously primarily police, but also we've got our communities teams. Again, I don't know how your council is structured, but we've got sort of locality teams, communities teams that have got that local knowledge, and also stakeholders in those areas that need to be on board, and also environmental health, because it obviously all aligns with the licensing objectives. And again, from a practical perspective, the tool needs to be simple to use, and it needs to be simple interface for users. That's not to say that we're actually giving just anyone access to this. I think because you would obviously need a certain amount of expertise to interpret this information and then write it up as part of an objection. So we do tend to sort of keep it within licensing and public health to use, but we've also upskilled our communities teams, and that's sort of worked very well. So we've got that sort of joint working relationship around this. If anyone's got any questions, I don't know, I can't really see any hands, so I'm just going to carry on. Is that all right?
I think we're okay at the moment.
Okay, cool. So I'll just hand over to Adam.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, I'm just going to try pressing the take control button because I want to get my cursor to appear on the screen. Can you see my cursor now?
Yeah, shall I just allow you?
Yeah. You can see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so these slides are, well, the view of the interface to the matrix, and then I'll get on to how it works. But for now, imagine that you've got this, and you've got your application, and you've got your postcode. The user just has to put the postcode in over here, which is converted to the MSOA that the postcode sits within. And MSOA is the sort of the granularity of this model. The previous version was LSOA, which that one, the original version, grew organically, which is why I replaced it with this newer version, which I think is much better. So at LSOA level, you can imagine that there are quite a few parts of Leeds, for instance, where there isn't any violent crime, or ambulance call-outs related to alcohol is very low, and you end up with a very skewed data set where the LSOAs in the centre of town have enormous rates, but there's not much else. So by going to MSA, you end up with a bit more averaging going on, and you end up with a slightly more balanced data set. So that's why we ended up with MSOA. So after you've put your postcode in and you get your MSOA, this chart at the bottom, which is every single MSOA in Leeds, there's 107, and this MSOA in question is outlined here in black. It's a bit hard to see perhaps on that colour. So that's basically telling us that the MSOA is, in terms of the harm that this model is predicting, ranked second highest in the city, which puts it in the very high category. If you want, you can find out which ward it's in, and there's another aspect of the tool where you can say, just tell me about Armley Ward, tell me which MSOAs fall within Armley Ward and what their scores are. So you can go about it slightly backwards if you want. So that chart doesn't change. The indicator will move depending on which postcode and MSOA you're looking at. And that's a list of indicators on the right. And for this MSOA, these coloured squares here are where the MSOA falls in the city for every indicator. So for deprivation score, it's very high. Population age 16 and under, it's high. So that's I think more useful than the overall score, because you get to see how each indicator is actually, in this case, all very high. So that's a useful way to, once you've made the score, to take it back apart again. And at the same thing, you'll get a rank for the indicator for this MSOA. So in terms of deprivation, this MSOA is 7th highest in the city. So that's what that screen shows you. So really, there's not much to do for the user apart from bring in their postcode, look at the overall rank, grab a screenshot of the chart, and then talk about the categories and the ranks individually. So, button to go. Merck, could you just advance the slide one, please?
Yep. Oh, now my head is appearing, isn't it? Is it gone or not? No. Oh, now I've clicked way too many times.
I've got it now.
Yeah. Okay.
So actually, the next couple of slides kind of just draw circles around the things I've been talking about. So
Adam.
Yeah.
It's Michael from Licensing at Bury. Can you just explain to me what an MSOA is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So an MSOA is middle super output area, and it's basically a definition of an area on the ground. I'm sorry if I assumed that you knew that. So everywhere in England is in one MSOA. The MSOAs share boundaries; they don't overlap. So your home postcode is in a single MSOA, and the MSOA shapes are automatically determined, so they contain on average the same number of people, whether they're in the middle of Leeds or off in Cumbria somewhere. It would just be much bigger in Cumbria to encompass the same number of people. So it's a standardized way to break your data up, if you like. And the LSOAs that I was talking about before, those are subsets of the MSOAs. So is that
okay? Thank you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, so these slides are going to probably just draw circles around what I was just talking about. So you can see the summary of this MSOA's individual indicators. I'm just trying to advance the screen again. Sorry, Mert, you'll have to do one more. There we go. Okay, yeah, so I've covered that as well, actually. So if you can get hold of the LSOA level data, it's very tempting to use it, but you do end up with a lot of holes where there's zeros, because these LSOAs are so small that they've just not had any of what you're measuring, and you end up with a very skewed data set. And I think, yes, I've got control now. So I'm going to just quickly go over how the model takes all those different indicators and then transforms it into a single score, which is the original aim of the model, was just to make that one score. But then we discovered it was very interesting, actually, to see the separate indicators as well. So this version, which I think is much more efficient, for each indicator, we'll make a Z score for the MSOA. So we'll get its average number of standard deviations from the mean. And then we'll index those so that they're all comparably scaled. And then if you think back to that list of indicators, some of them are more important than others, aren't they? So we know that deprivation is a factor, but we don't want it to weigh too heavily on the model. So things like deprivation, and I can't remember the others, we deliberately give quite a low weighting to. And then other ones get a medium and other ones get a high. So it's at this point that we add some weight to the model. And then we simply average the sum of the MSOA's index to Z scores that have been weighted to get a score for the MSOA. And then that score is what you saw in that first chart, which is that one single chart which isn't going to change, which is all the scores. So the original one, we went around the houses trying to do all kinds of clever weighting, but actually the output of the original model, which was based on LSOAs and scored and weighted in a completely different way, is really similar to the new version, which is what you've just seen here, which is encouraging, I think, because we're trying to uncover the overall shape of the combined data sets. And there is another aspect to it. So when we're looking at the map of all of those combined scores in this stage, they're obviously, depending on how much weighting you apply to the low, medium and high, changes the overall picture a little bit. And we had a few instances where the map was showing us something which actually didn't ring very true. So we were able to just tweak that weighting a little bit to bring it back into what Sue's experience was telling her about how different parts of the city vary. So just to summarize, so once we've made the single score for each MSOA, we've just broken them down into categories again, which are low, medium, high and very high. There's no science to this. We tended to look for a step. So a little step there, there's another step there, another one there. And we basically said, oh, these make sense to be a boundary between low and medium and high. And they also happen to give us quite a nice focus on the higher because there's fewer of them. Here's a screenshot of the map. So this is done in an online mapping tool, but in the weighting process we did it differently, but we were able to quickly change the weights and look at the map, change the weights and look at the map and see how these areas moved about. And this is the stage where we would put in some of the old application postcodes for something that happened years ago that had been contentious and people had wished that they could have objected to. And seeing on the map now what sort of score it would have got had we had the tool. So that was a really useful way for us to gauge the model now against what should have happened in the past. So in this version of the map, you can put your postcode in and you end up with your MSOA circled, which is this black one here. So this is not the same one we were looking at earlier. That's somewhere in this red bit here. We've got those corners, the sort of top left and top right corners. Those are quite affluent parts of the city, I think. So although there's pockets of deprivation, but they would not go away. It didn't seem to matter what we did with our weighting. Something is causing these two corners to have a higher score than.
Did you want me to just quickly explain?
Yeah,
that top right hand corner orange blob is Wetherby, and Wetherby is quite an affluent area of Leeds. We were expecting it to be green and it came back orange. And when we actually looked at all the data sets, that's an area which has got admissions to hospital, alcohol related admissions and alcohol specific admissions to hospital, and something around audit C scoring, which if you're not aware what that is the number of units you report to your GP when they ask you how much you drink. We record that. So we have an area there where you have got people that are reporting quite a high number of units to their GP, so they're drinking a lot and they're going to hospital for alcohol related or alcohol specific issues. So we're saying that this is not an area that's got a lot of antisocial behaviour, but it's a lot of people drinking at home and perhaps to a harmful level, which actually is Wetherby, so that's about right.
Yes.
And we know, don't we, that those areas, it's even when I worked in the primary care trust, they were highlighted as higher risk of alcohol harm. But again, that was purely based on health statistics at the time, not on anything to do with crime.
Yeah, that's right. And then if you think back to the model page where you've got the list of indicators and each indicator's rank, if you like, if you compare the one that we saw to the one for Wetherby, you'll see that, as Sue said, some of them will be high and the rest of them will be very low. So you can form a picture, like Sue was saying, of the characteristics of the MSOA by the way each indicator group changes. Try and change the page. Okay, so this is the list of the indicators again, and it's just sort of summarizing how we weighted them in the model. So deprivation score gets low weight, and so does NEATs. We've got a few there which are more to do at the top with vulnerability in the population, but then from about here on downwards, it's all to do with the harm which we can measure. And I've got a question. Oh no, it's from Sue. So yeah, so that was the way we split them into their weighting, but then the weights that were applied to low, medium, and high were applied to all of the high, all of the medium, and all of the low, and ended up with that map that we saw before. Trying to change this page. Okay, indicator suitability. I think we've got at least one analyst in the meeting, so I thought it was going to be more analysts, so I wrote quite a lot. But we assessed for each indicator set. We kind of looked at the distribution. We decided if it was too skewed or not. If it was too skewed, if it had too many with too much happening and too few with not enough, then we would add more time to the data set to try and see if we can get a more normal distribution. We assessed the kurtosis as well, the kind of the spike on the normal distribution. Once we'd done that, once we'd added more time to the data to add some meat to the bone, if the skew and the kurtosis were good enough, then we looked at what's the word I'm looking for, correlation, because what you don't want is a couple of indicators which have got different names, measure different things, but actually tell you exactly the same thing, because that's just doubling up or tripling up. So it was quite important to make sure that we didn't have too much strong cross correlation between indicators. We've got a message here from Paul. Yeah. So you're talking in the chat there about the update. The idea originally was to do it every year, and then COVID came along, which kind of slowed everything down a bit. We managed to get one done in 2021, and there's one happening about nowish actually for this year. So when we chose those indicators, we made sure that we weren't picking something which was unique and never going to happen again. So in theory, we can get them again and again and again and again. That might be my last slide. It is. So that's how it works. But using it is another thing entirely, and that's Sue, I think.
It is me, yes.
Could I just ask the MSOA? I think I understand where that question's coming from. In say a classic urban area, how big is an MSOA? How many postcodes would be in there?
Do you know what? I can never remember off the top of my head. I think it's 7,000 people.
Yeah, 10,000, roughly 10,000, isn't it? Yeah,
So
yeah.
10,000.
Yeah, so in the middle of Leeds, they're quite small because they're so densely populated,
Yeah.
but contain the same number of people as somewhere else.
Yeah, you know, the eternal challenge that we have in writing a representation is, you know, you're always challenged are the points that you're making, do they directly pertain to those premises? Otherwise, you know, they use that as a counter argument and try and counteract what you're arguing.
So the previous model, which was based on LSOAs, was around 1,500 people.
Mm.
And from a licensing point of view, I preferred it because it was a lot more specific to, it was literally a few streets.
Mm.
But we find actually what we found is the MSOA level data is actually good enough. Because in an area that for us is an issue, they are generally the more densely populated areas. So for Hare Hills, which we've having ongoing issues with for all sorts of reasons, that's actually is 2 or 3 MSOAs. So you can be quite specific within Hare Hills to the data that you're putting back. So it's fine. It's fine. As I say, I would have preferred to keep it as LSOAs, but there's no point in having data if it's skewed. So not that I know what skewed means, but yeah, MSOA works fine.
But yeah, it does tend to be, like you said, the areas that score the highest are the inner city ones, which are the most densely populated, and you could walk across an MSOA in parts of Leeds in minutes. So it's not really an issue. That's me. Over to you, Sue.
I think we've got somebody who's got their hand up.
Oh, sorry. Who's that?
I don't know. Can you see? Oh no.
Is that Naira with her hand up? That's Phil. Sorry, Phil.
Sorry,
Okay.
I just thought of a question right at the end there. So just on the weighting of the indicators, is that just like a policy decision then, like deciding which ones you want to weight higher and not, like, you know, or was there anything else behind those weightings that made certain that you picked out certain indicators as high priority sort of thing?
Yeah, because this was a model that we were going to use with the Licensing Act. We weighted more heavily the data sets that related more strongly or more directly to a licensing objective. So you'll see on there that things like crime is weighted quite highly, whereas deprivation isn't, because deprivation isn't something we would normally take into consideration when we make a licensing decision. Deprivation is important because it gives context, but it's not something that you would want to stand up in a magistrate's court to defend. So whereas crime and children are certainly a higher priority for us. So that's why we weighted them that way. I have to say it wasn't Adam's choice which ones we weighted. It was a licensing decision.
Okay. And there's a question from Niara.
Yeah, it was just around some of the indicators, because obviously you've got some national kind of ones there as well. But in terms of, for example, your treatment data, did you consider, I mean, are some of those included, like your kind of commission kind of treatment providers, for example, young people that might be in treatment and services?
There is one in there, isn't there, about numbers of people in alcohol treatment, I think, but not young people. It's adults. It's primarily adults.
We did have some issues with identifying repeat visits as well. They weren't able to give us a number of unique visitors, so it became more of a number of people who've been on their treatment, which is still representative of something.
Sue, do you want to cover this slide, or was there another question? I wasn't sure. I can't see anything, you see.
I think we're okay now.
I think we're okay now.
I think we're okay.
Okay, so on a practical level, when we first got this tool, we loved it and we thought it was ever so useful, and we thought everybody else would love it too. So we presented it to our responsible authorities. In licensing, we were really keen on it. So we took it to one of our licensing enforcement groups. We showed it to everybody. We did loads of training with the communities teams. We went out into the communities and said, come and look at this tool. It's amazing. You'll love it. And everybody went, yeah, that's really good. And yeah, that's really interesting. And then nobody used it, which was a bit disappointing. But it's because really those responsible authorities have their own way of judging the issues relating to a licensing application. And we were very specific about what we wanted to use it for. We wanted to use it for applications where there probably wasn't a high reporting of crime, and that was because those communities don't report crime. So we knew that these were areas that were in trouble. We didn't necessarily have the evidence to say why they were in trouble or what the problems were. And this is what this matrix gave us, was the hard evidence that shows, what the problems are in a certain area. So we kind of regrouped and we decided that really, seeing as it's public health and licensing that had driven this, it would be public health and licensing that used it. Anybody else could use it if they wanted to, but honestly, it was, we created it for ourselves, so that's absolutely fine. So the way it works now is that an application is received and it's either identified as a priority area by public health, or it's in a community of impact area. And for anybody that doesn't know what a community of impact area is, that's an area that we designated as a council as an area suffering from the cumulative impact of licensed premises. It's a legal thing that goes in our policy, and we have to do an assessment every 3 years. But they're very defined localities. So if we see that it's an application in a community of impact area, I'll put the postcode into the matrix. I'll pull up the details, and that will form the basis of my representation, and that will get the application in front of a licensing committee. we also send that information, or Public Health send that information to the communities team, who are then able to use it to stimulate interest, support from members of the public and so on, who will also make representations. And this is all provided to the licensing subcommittee, and they can take it into consideration when they make their decision. I think it's really important to say that this is not data that stands on its own. So I have sat in a licensing subcommittee as the licensing authority and told the 3 members that I want them to refuse a licensing application because it's in a community of impact assessment area. And they've said, basically, that's not enough. We need more. That's not enough for us to refuse it. So on its own. And so what we have developed in these are strong links with our communities teams and our ward members, and environmental health and the police, the local neighbourhood policing teams, and we get together as a group and make a representation. So, for example, at the moment, we've got 2 new applications coming for off licences in Hare Hills, and we've put the email out, and we are now waiting for the representations to come rolling in. But it will be pretty much an off-the-shelf representation for applications that come into Hare Hills, and each of the ward members, each of the groups know basically what approach they're going to take. And then when we get to the licensing subcommittee, there's me and Public Health, and we will talk about the statistical stuff, which is really boring, but does give an evidential basis. And then our lovely ward members will talk about what it's like to live and work in these areas, what it's like to walk your child up a street which has got 25 street drinkers drinking and swearing and throwing up in a gutter, or what it's like to have to dodge human feces on a pavement as they're walking their kids to school. This really is quite subjective, but it's really compelling storytelling that they do, that they are really, really good at, and us in licensing are really, really bad at. So it works really well. If we can get members of the public there and businesses, that works really well as well. It's great to have the PCSOs or the neighbourhood policing team there, who are able to tell the committee how many times they're taking alcohol off people and that in the street, and that's really compelling as well. And all of this sits together as a body of evidence that goes in front of the licensing subcommittee and helps them make their decision, which so far has always been the right decision, which is good. Right, so can we next slide, please, Merton?
I'm trying.
I'd offer to take control and do it, but
I think it's come up now.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
brilliant. So I've just discussed this. The other thing we do is we use this same information to do our community impact assessment every 3 years. I will take a range of postcodes from an existing area of concern. I'll bring them into the matrix, and then that's the data that we'll put into the community impact assessment. It sits very nicely right next to the police statistical data. And those 2 forms of data, then that's our evidence for describing something as a community impact assessment. Okay. And yes, we've been really successful. As I say, we if it gets as far as a licensing subcommittee, some people do withdraw their applications once they receive 7 or 8 really strong objections. But the ones that do go to licensing subcommittee, the vast majority are refused. And the one withdrawn there was one that was actually withdrawn in the middle of a hearing, which was really special. I've not actually had that before, so that was impressive. That was Heron Foods, which is it's a big national, and they came along all full of bravado, and they literally got halfway through the hearing and they said, I don't think there's any point in going any further. We can see which way this is going. We'd like to withdraw our application. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, Meta. Yeah. Did you want me to explain what a CIA is, or is everybody okay?
Yeah, I just want, it gives a bit of context, I guess, as well for people who maybe some of local authorities that maybe don't operate with them. I don't I don't know if people here are familiar with cumulative impact assessments, but I just thought it'd be useful.
We have 6 in Leeds. They used to be purely for the really busy nighttime economy area, so our city centre and Headingley, which is our student area. We went through a brief period where we had some really wishful thinking type cumulative impact areas in our outer areas where we had really active ward members who wanted to have this label. And it took us quite a while to convince them that actually having that as a label wasn't a good thing. And their lovely village in the middle of Leeds probably didn't need to be in a community of impact area. Then we had an issue with street drinkers in Armley, and it was really, really problematic because we had these groups of 15 to 20 middle-aged men standing on Armley Town Street, on the main shopping street, being really intimidating. And everybody kept saying, oh, we need to do something about it. We need to stop more off licenses from opening. And we just said, it's really difficult to tie a specific issue like the drinking of alcohol to specific types of premises, because at the end of the day, someone could have bought their alcohol from Asda 3 miles away when they did their weekly shop. But then when we actually looked at Armley itself and looked at the people that were causing the problems, these were all dependent drinkers. And the reason why they were stood in the street was because they didn't want to move that far from the shops they were buying their alcohol from. And so we felt confident that we could link the alcohol consumption on the street with the off licenses in that road. We couldn't do it if you're talking about drinking at home, because as I say, people can buy their alcohol from the supermarket or online or what, wherever. But specifically street drinking and off license, there's a very close correlation between the two. And we know that because we've done quite a lot of outreach work with our street drinkers in Hare Hills, and we know that they sit in a particular location because they've got an off license here and a betting shop there, and that's why they sit here. And so we can say, yes, the problems with that street drinking is directly related to that off license and that betting shop. And that's the same thing we had in Armley. And so we created a community of impact area for Armley Town Street, but it was quite a small one because it was really concentrated on the actual shopping street. But then when you look at Hare Hills has got 2 main roads. You've got Hare Hills Lane and Hare Hills Road, and they're sort of that shaped. And so we drew an area all the way around, and that's actually been really well received. We haven't seen a reduction in the street drinking in those areas because of our community of impact assessment, but what we have done is we've stopped more and more off licenses opening, because people see lots of people drinking in the street and think, well, that's a great place to put an off license because we'll have loads of ready-made customers. And if I can tell you that Hare Hills Lane and Hare Hills Road, it's probably about a mile and a half long, and we've got 29 off licenses in that area. And we've just refused one that's going to appeal on Monday. We've got another 2 applications in, so it's exhausting and constant, and people don't seem to learn by what's happened with applications previously. They're just going to give it a go anyway. So the CIAs do work to stop them, but in Hare Hills and Armley, it doesn't stop them from applying, unfortunately. So we have to keep the pressure on, and it is difficult for the localities team and the people that live there because they're constantly fighting new off license applications. Okay. Oh yes, and these are our wins. I've got
just a couple of examples
here. Yeah. So this was our Hare Hills off license, and that's see, that our licensing officer said that's me, and this is when we were doing it on LSOA. So we had 482 LSOAs, and yes, they picked that. That's the newspaper picked that out. And then the next one is a bit more recent. That's our holiday resort for street drinkers in Hare Hills, which I kind of wished.
Yeah, from a public health perspective and stigma
Yeah.
and all the rest of it, it's not particularly great. But yeah, I think this is the kind of stuff that that newspapers like to print.
So that came from the police officer, who said that because we would put treatment services in and we had an outreach worker working, and then we've got all these off licenses and all these facilities for street drinkers, that we'd actually created a bit of a problem for ourselves. You know, there's an argument there really, but
yeah, but this again from a public health perspective, so I was involved in that with another colleague who specifically works in that locality. So I've got more of a citywide role, and Chetna, my colleague's got more of a localities role. So she's got really good working relationships with some of the GPs in the area, with our customer service centre. So the way we work together is we sort of complement each other in the public health objection, is where I sort of kind of look at the, you know, work out the how best to describe the kind of quantitative picture around the indicators, and then Chetna adds to that by she got quotes from the Compton Centre, which is just opposite this particular premises, a local GP. So rather than, obviously, you know, a lot of licensing committees would say, why doesn't the GP come and represent themselves? But obviously we all know that is completely unrealistic in today's climate in primary care. So what we tend to do is we get the statements from our local stakeholders around the issue in that particular area, and then integrate it into the public health objection, if that makes sense. And again, try and make it as localized as possible. So if there's like a local voluntary sector organization that we work closely with, that's just up the road, ask them to comment on vulnerable young people, or yeah, other things that are specifically related to alcohol harm. So again, even within our public health objection, we integrate the kind of quantitative data with the qualitative data, and again, try and all sing from the same hymn sheet, obviously with all the other responsible authorities and Sue's contribution.
I think we've got a question from Paul.
I'll just come out because I literally can't see anyone. I can't see hands. I can't see chat. Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks, Gareth, and thanks. That's really good. I'd echo the comments around partnership working. It sounds like you've got really good links in Leeds, which is, you know, you've got to be watertight with something like this. It strikes me that's a real strength of the model, in addition to obviously the analytical capacity. It was just a quick query really around cumulative impact zones. So in Trafford, where I'm from, we used to have one. Well, we had two actually in two of our more prominent town centres, Sale and Altrincham. Because of COVID, during that time, obviously when everyone was indoors and there were lockdowns and so on, licensing were pushing for, you know, GMP to say, well, actually, you've not got that volume now because COVID's here. So, you know, nobody's going out. So there's no way you've got the crime data to justify keeping those zones. And guess what happened? Yes, that's exactly what happened. They revoked it and said, oh, right, OK. And then I remember seeing about a couple of months later something, because you obviously get groups of solicitors that put these applications in saying, quick, get over to Trafford because they've just got rid of their cumulative impact zone. So I just wondered what the view on that was, because obviously during COVID, you wouldn't have had the volume of figures because people couldn't go anywhere, because obviously places were locked down and people were on furlough. So I just wondered what the future of cumulative impact zones was, given what's gone on during COVID and that we lost our cumulative impact zone. And I would think there'd be very much a resistance to putting it back, because obviously people are not going out as much as they used to, and also, you know, you're not going to get the volume, therefore you're not going to get the volume of crime figures which are going to justify including. So just want your view on that really.
So our community impact assessment, the last one we did was in 2018. So it was due for review in 2021. Obviously, we called for the data, the crime data, which showed a dip in 2020, of course. And we took a report to our licensing committee, and we heard that other authorities were ditching their CIAs. Now, Leeds works at the pace of an arthritic snail. It takes a good 9 to 10 months to get any kind of policy in front of full council. There's absolutely no way I was ditching hours for the sake of something that's going to hopefully in 2021 when we're looking at, we were hoping it was going to be a fairly short dip. So we took a report to Licensing Committee in 2021 and said that due to the extraordinary circumstances, we would like to do a very, very brief review, but keep everything exactly as it was, maintain the status quo until we could do a proper review in 2022/23, when hopefully the worst effects of the pandemic would be over. So that's what we were going to do. And then we got to 2022, things were still the crime. We got the stats through, and the stats showed that so the crime stats that we got were, we took from 2019 to 2022. And you could see on the graphs, there was a definite dip with every closure, but then it would rise back to almost back to the same level as it was in between. And we felt that gave us enough evidence to hold on until we had better, more consistent data. However, we then did the Licencing subcommittee hearing. We refused that application, and then Licencing lodged an appeal. And we realised that we then had a quite a community impact assessment that was on fairly unsteady grounds, because it should have been reviewed in 2021 properly, and we didn't. We kind of like did this kind of, wow, we're going to kind of do a half a review and leave it as it is. So I did a very rapid review at the end of last year, and we've got a new CIA, which came in December 22, purely because we're going to be up against Sarah Clover for Let's Go appeal, and I don't want to do that with a CIA that could be a bit dubious. What I would have liked to have done, what I was planning to do, was to hold until the middle of 2023, and then I could show that those dips in crime were definitely only related to the pandemic, and that everything was back to how it was pre-pandemic. And in fact, I've just had the city centre stats, because we review those every year. So we get the stats every year, and we are back to exactly where we were in 2019. So I'm confident that we did the right thing by not getting rid of ours. And if we had got rid of ours, I'd certainly be looking to put them back in place again. Because we had this discussion yesterday with our police about what we're doing with our city centre. Very busy nighttime economy. And we said, well, what would we do if we just scrapped our CIA in the city centre? What would happen? And we've just said, well, it would be a free-for-all. We would have loads of applications. We'd have people applying for 5 a.m, 6 a.m, 7 a.m. We would have the premises that are currently retail would be converting to bars, and our area, which really does suffer with density issues, and people falling under cars, and people, being robbed and all the rest of it because they're vulnerable and drunk, it just gets so much worse. So we've decided, no, we like our CIA and we're hanging on to it. Thank you very much.
Is that essentially the end of the presentation? Yeah. Millie?
Hi, I just want to comment on how I found using it, really. I'm relatively new to this role. I started back in November, and I've come from a regional perspective, a regional role, and I've had no background in licensing prior to this job. And I found it incredibly easy to understand and to pick it up quite quickly as well, learning about the CIAs and everything, and understanding the different areas of Leeds. I've only moved back to Leeds about 2 years ago, so I found it really useful for not just licensing, but also other projects that I'm doing as part of my role, and really, really easy and comprehensive to use.
That's great, thank you. Phil?
Hi, yeah, I had two questions actually. One for Adam, just around the data sources and kind of like how kind of recent is the data that's going into it? Like, if you think of some of the data sets you can get for some of those, it's the timeliness of the updates isn't always great. So how do you know that the data you're putting into your matrix is still giving an accurate current picture? I suppose is my question, as much as we can in public health, because we know some of our data sets are behind.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking now at the list from the model that was updated in 2021, and that's a mix. Some of the data ends in 2021, some in 2020, and it's aggregated sort of back in time in, say, 3 years to give us enough. So it moves along like this. But I think it's kind of almost what Sue was saying. They know these things don't change much, and they don't change very quickly, and their trends are quite steady. So if they haven't got the latest year's data, it's not. Yes, you haven't got the absolute proof, have you? But it's going that way.
And what kind of sources are you using for the data, just out of interest?
Yeah, good question. So there's a mix. Some of it's from Leeds children's teams. We've got a thing called Safer Leeds, which is a kind of council and police joint body. There's stuff that comes from hospital episode statistics. Forward Leeds is one of the treatment centres. We've got some ambulance call-outs from Yaz and Public Health England. And then the Audit C, the thing that Sue was talking about, where you tell the GP how much you've been drinking, that comes from Leeds GP registers. So, but they all come at either MSOA or LSOA and then aggregated up to MSOA.
So partnerships with your integrated care boards to get a lot of that data.
Yeah, and
yeah. Which is available. Like it's not. But yeah, just trying to get my head around sort of where some of it comes from. I suppose the other question I had, probably a bit more for Sue, is there sort of an occasion where something might flag up on your matrix and you think, actually, we don't want to object to that, like. It might necessarily say, yeah, this might not be the greatest thing, but taking everything into context, we're not going to put an objection in.
I think if it's in a community of impact assessment area, depending on which one it is, if it's Hare Hills or Armley, I'll always make an objection. If it's the city centre in our red zone, I'll always make an objection. However, if it's Headingley, I will go and speak to my ward members and I will take a view from them, because we've done quite a lot of work in Headingley, because it's a student area, to encourage certain styles of business and not others. So anything that is a large capacity student aim, bar, then we'll put an objection to. But if it's a nice restaurant or a hand ground gin bar, whatever, that the members quite like the look of, then no, we won't make an objection to that. So it's very much on there. And in fact, it's worked really well in Headingley, because we've turned the style of the drinking in Headingley by allowing some stuff in. And let's not forget Leeds, Brewdog versus Leeds City Council, where we were told not to bring an iron shutter clanging down on an area just because it's in a community of impact area. So our lovely angry Judge Anderson told us off for that. That was a few years ago. Yes, that was that was one I attended. It was an amazing appeal.
Interesting.
I was going to add actually to what Sue was saying, from public health perspective, we would always look at the type of premises, because you can have something highlight a very high risk as an area, but if you look, it's like some kind of independent brewery, a bit like what Sue's describing, it's very different than having an off license that sells loads and loads of cheap cider, so it is completely about, what kind of clientele are you actually aiming this at,
The other interesting case is in South Leeds. We used to have a bit of a food desert in some of our areas down there, and in fact, the only way really to get something like Lidl or Asda in, where people have access to fresh fruit and veg, was to allow them to have alcohol. They wouldn't have gone in without an alcohol license. Actually, it's far more important that people in those areas had access to fresh fruit and veg than it was to restrict the access to alcohol. So you have to look at each on a case-by-case basis, and that's what we're encouraged to do under the Licensing Act anyway.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to ask is, anyone who's sitting watching this presentation now thinks, we want that. We want this matrix. What's our first step?
From my point of view, I could write some instructions, but that's really the middle bit. And if you haven't got the organisation and the links, it's pointless.
Right.
You need good links between your public health analyst and your licensing team. So whoever you think is actually going to use it needs to be involved right at the very beginning.
Right.
There's no point in creating something that nobody's going to use. As I said, we toted it all around the council thinking that everybody would snap our hands off. And in fact, at the end of the day, I could see in licensing, we could see the value, and obviously public health could see the value, but everybody else had their own ways of working. So,
right. So if you don't sort out your analyst capacity and your analyst cooperation, plus a healthy level of interest from licensing, it's no good moving to Adam's stage 2, where you would have instructions for actually creating the matrix.
Yeah, you need to have a vision on who's going to actually use the end product and get them on board. It might be that your setup is that your public health specialists are right in there and would use it and are have strong enough links with licensing that they'd be okay. But certainly in Leeds, it needed to be somebody from licensing.
Okay, Naira. Sorry, Naira.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I've got just a couple of questions. You mentioned that do you screen every single application using that tool, or just those in the priority area, the cumulative impact area?
I look at everything that comes in because I'm in licensing, and I'm one of the managers, so I see everything that comes across. As it used to be, comes across my desk, but we don't have that anymore. But we have a daily email list that goes out with all our license applications as they come in. So we've got a daily list. So I keep an eye on that, and I pick out the ones that I think are in a difficult area. It certainly, if it's in a community impact area, then absolutely I'm looking.
And the other thing, the other question was to you, Adam, really, because I noticed that you kind of mapped that. You had a mapping kind of tool, but do you look at the proximity of kind of of that license, the application in relation to kind of key venues? So, for example, the proximity to a school, proximity to a treatment centre. Do you have something that kind of gives that? And because it wasn't included in the indicators, but do you complement it with that?
Yeah, we did the previous version because it was LSOA. We had, well, we thought more or less the same thing. You could have an LSOA that you could walk across in 2 minutes. And that's right next to another one with just as many vulnerable people in it, but it's not high. It's not marked as high, but the people who live here could walk there and get their booze, the drop of a hat. So that the previous model used to look at the surrounding areas if it was high and factor in a bit of extra score for the ones that surrounded it because they were so close to the area which was high. The new model doesn't do that because its MSOAs, they're a bit bigger, so it's not looking at affected areas, but we don't look at any point data like services like that you're talking about, or schools, but we have got information about the number of children who live in these areas and the number of NEETs or looked after children. So we're looking more at the vulnerability of the people who live there than the proximity.
Proximity. Right, okay, that's helpful.
Sorry, I just had an addition to that, because I know that our councillors do refer to schools and proximity to the premises a lot of the time, again because of the licensing objectives around children, and again, like I said, when in public health, when we do an objection, we do look at other kind of community assets around it where there's potentially vulnerable groups congregating. So it could be children, young people, but it could also maybe be, other people maybe with mental health problems or something like that. So yeah, we would always consider that's why we work with our localities team. That's why we work with people that know the community, obviously in our council. So I think that will probably take more like local knowledge potentially to add that on, if that makes sense.
It does, when you're talking about your locality teams, let's say, for example, we've got like the community which is a community development team, so they kind of do the health, and that you're talking about them, or are you talking more around your actually neighbourhoods teams, and that might deal with resident complaints, or just general stuff? So is it both?
We don't really have community development teams as such, but I would imagine that those teams would have that local knowledge about some of those really kind of localized issues. But yeah, we've got so our communities teams primarily kind of work really closely with our councillors. So it's a kind of quite reactive kind of role from what I've seen anyway, and it complements what our public health localities colleagues do, who specifically focus on health and well-being in certain areas.
Brilliant. And then I had another, I've got quite a few questions. I just wanted to know how that works with the online delivery, because obviously we're saying that whether you're seeing an increase of applications for online delivery. Does this tool work for that as well or not?
I did the pharmacy needs assessment last year for Leeds, and we get stacks of data about who's being prescribed what and where they're going to get their prescriptions dispensed. That would be amazing, wouldn't it, if you had that for alcohol online ordering? But I'm not aware of any source that would tell us that, or that would be of any sort of high resolution, I'm afraid. It
remains a challenge.
It is, yeah.
I think with delivery services, obviously that's a massive thing at the moment, and we're getting loads of applications for people like Amazon. I don't think it's specific enough to a certain locality. So if you have a warehouse unit that's doing alcohol deliveries, they'll be delivering all over Leeds. So I don't think this tool is useful in that respect. We certainly wouldn't look at alcohol delivery services with this tool.
Paul?
Just a quick one really, Gareth. I just wonder, I'm less connected to the substance misuse agenda these days, but I just wondered, is this something that, at 10GM would look at as possibly as a system across 10GM as a way of sort of harmonising standards around licensing? Just a thought really around the Substance Misuse Commissioner meeting, for example.
I think that's a great point, and if people don't mind, I'll certainly take that to GM commissioners about a collective effort and raise awareness again of what Leeds colleagues have been telling us. Are we okay to wrap that one up there and thank our Leeds colleagues? Sorry, Naira.
I just got a really quick question, only because it's something that's been coming up and stuff. I think the tool I think it's fantastic. Is there opportunity to use that with because obviously with the alcohol we also get late night refreshments license as well, and so I suppose obviously we've got increasing obesity in Manchester, could potentially that be expanded to include the late night refreshments applications kind of linking to the obesity agenda? Is there potential there?
Yeah, I've been asked to, but never had the time to get involved with the obesity side of it. Sorry, Sue, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, unfortunately, obesity is a health issue, and that's not something that we deal with under the Licensing Act. It's one of those bizarre things. But this particular model, you could use different data sets, and you could use it for all sorts of stuff. I mean, I know certainly, Mercer, you've used it around putting liver testing equipment in GPs.
Well, yeah, we pulled a couple of those indicators off and again, I've presented it to health colleagues as well, because they're quite interested in not just seeing the health stats, but seeing the other stats that back up what they're seeing, on a day-to-day basis, like the crime stuff, So yeah, I think I think I've never seen it as just like a licensing kind of specific thing, because it's just got so much rich data in there that we can use to engage all sorts of stakeholders around this agenda, so yeah, I feel but yeah, again, like we were talking about expanding it for gambling, but yeah, it all becomes, I guess the bigger it becomes, the less meaningful it can become, if that makes sense. So yeah,
I think you'd have a
to be
different
quite
version.
careful.
I think you'd use a different version with different data sets in for your for each of your applications. We use this particular matrix for our gambling applications as well. because it's got so much stuff around children in. So I can look at Hare Hills and it will come up very high for looked after children, NEETs, low educational attainment, and there's another one, the 4 data sets around children. And I'll use that to say that there are a lot of vulnerable children in this area. And I'll use that as the basis of my negotiations with gambling applications, because as we know, we can't bloody refuse things. So.
Brilliant. Look, thank you so much to colleagues from Leeds. That was absolutely fantastic. Did you win that LGA award?
No, but it was a very big party.
Well,
sadly, I wasn't there. I wasn't involved then. I couldn't go to the ceremony.
No, look, it's of great interest, and I think really marvelous use, and we're very grateful to you. The inevitable question, if we do go about this the right way, start by talking to partners and making sure we set the right scene. Can we come back to you? Can we approach you for next steps and those instructions? Because if you're okay to share some contact details, that would be absolutely wonderful. And we're going to wrap up in 5 or 10 minutes or so. If you're able to stick around, that'd be great. Oh, Phil, sorry.
I was just going to ask, I'd be interested to cast my eye over the instructions either way, just to kind of get my head a bit round everything that goes into it. Whether it comes off or not, it might be an idea for me just to have a quick look.
Well,
as we say.
Phil and I are both Bolton, and we've got the links with licensing. That's for sure. And if we've got a Phil and a Lucy that we have on board, we might be halfway there. So if Phil and Adam are able to share, that would be fantastic. But if you could share your contact details with me, I'll include them in what we put out after the meeting, which will just be a link to the recording and a few very, very concise bullet points. So major thanks again to Leeds. So just closing things off, I'm an interim public health practitioner with Bolton, and they very generously extended my time several times now, but I really am due to finish at the end of March. The funding that is attached to my post, I really can't see it going much beyond that, and it's definitely not my group anyway. So really looking for somebody who would want to take on the next meeting, find an agenda, and do a bit of the old secretariat, emailing out and setting things up. It's not too onerous, and I'd be happy to help do that for the next one. But I'm just not going to be here, folks. So if people see it as useful and valuable, is there anybody who might like to step up, and then perhaps we could have like a rotating chair who we could pass it along, and somebody else could set up the next one and set the agenda and so on.
Just thinking now, because some people have kind of slipped off, so I think there's escaped. So I wonder whether it's worth kind of following up in an email, and we kind of mention, and people to kind of put themselves forward. Because for example, I wouldn't be able to do anything to spoke to a manager, so I think it's probably worth. And that rotating kind of sounds nice, so we all kind of share a piece of the cake.
You could kind of put your own particular pet issue on the agenda and pull in a meeting around that, and we'd all benefit. But I really can't carry on with it, unfortunately. So yeah, maybe if I put that into the meeting follow-up, and hopefully somebody will step up to the plate, because I've had some fantastic help so far, Naira and Sarah, to mention just two. So I'll put that into the follow-up. I say it'll be a link to the recording and just a few bullets. There's no capacity for minutes or anything like that. And I will. Are Leeds contacts in the chat? Have they gone into the chat? That'd be great if you do that, and then I'll make sure that they're shared around. So is there anything else?
Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolute pleasure.
Thank
And
you.
if anyone,
Very interesting.
Yeah. If anyone knows of any jobs going come April,
should be plenty.
Don't worry. No, a little bit of humour at the end there, maybe. But look, thank you, everyone. Absolutely, really fascinating, really valuable, and great to see everybody. And thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.